We'll get started now. Thank you all for coming. I'm very happy to welcome you all to the Nandanjeet Khemka lecture of the Center for the Advanced Study of India at Penn. And our speaker this afternoon needs little introduction. Dr. Rukmini Banerji is the CEO of Pratham, and she will be speaking on the challenges of elementary education in India. Pratham, as many of you know, is India's largest education movement, and a very important reason why it has become so important is thanks to Rukmini's sort of leadership. Rukmini trained as an economist at Stephens and the Delhi School of Economics, and then she went as a Rhodes Scholar to Oxford, and after that she went to the University of Chicago, which I gather at that time still had a graduate school of education, which I think the business school has since swallowed up. And her interest in primary education actually began there while doing her PhD, when she did her field work in the schools in the inner city in Chicago. She went back to India and joined Pratham in 1996. The organization started a year earlier in 1995, looking at elementary education in the slums of Mumbai. Since then, of course, it has been a sort of historic journey for Pratham. And one of the things which I think some of you who know, Rukmini, what is sort of remarkable about her is first she has a really deep sort of egalitarian sensibility, and which is really the passion that drives her in ensuring that all children should have a decent sort of education. And then the other thing which she brings is a real openness to new ideas, to new people, and new processes. This is exactly what led her to create this landmark report called ASR, which is the annual status of education in India. And what's remarkable is, despite the huge number of inputs in elementary education in India, there was virtually no measure of outcomes. And ASR is a truly extraordinary effort. Every year, they test 650,000 odd students across the country with a largely volunteer force of about 25,000 people. And it's really become the landmark by which we think of very large-scale testing. And this sort of ability to scale up, to think of working in low-cost environments, working with government, not against government. These are some of the hallmarks of Rukmini's work, and it's a great pleasure to have her. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Devesh. It's very intimidating to be firstly at a university like this. For some reason which I have not completely understood, we are rarely invited to speak at universities in India. So to come here and then to be in a room like this is a huge honor. And also to speak at a university when you're not academic, I think has its own challenges. I know there are a lot of experts in this room, and what I thought I would do is really put out, both from work on the ground as well as work in the sky, issues and questions that are currently bothering us. And I'm hoping that we'll have a good discussion. Whatever I say can lay the ground, and then we can have a good discussion that can be helpful to us as we go along. So challenges of elementary education in India or anywhere else are many. And so I'll only talk about sort of one slice through it all. Yesterday, I heard a lot of, I was in Washington, DC, and there was a report being released by Brookings called The Millions Learning. And around that report, there was a lot of panels and discussions. And I noticed that there were, I'm simplifying, but two types of discussions that happened. One which said the world is a very complicated place, and therefore, many complex things need to be done before the world can change. And there was another lot which said, take a slice through it, see what you can do, and move ahead. And it's very clear which side we belong to. It's not that we don't think that the world is a complicated place, but we are quite simple people. So it's a little hard for simple people to do complicated things, so hence you do simple things. And I think that that's kind of the spirit behind Pratham, both in terms of the work we do on the ground, as well as whatever, we don't like to call it research, because research means there was a search, and then you searched it again and came to something better. So whatever is the word for when you do it the first time and do a simple thing, that's what we do. So I thought, I've also been in various forums where storytelling is okay. So I'm going to start with a story, and I'm going to end with a story. That way you're ensured that at least people are awake in the beginning and awake at the end. It's a story that I think will illustrate some of the opportunities and the challenges that I think we in India face, both within the government and outside. This happened a few years ago. I got a phone call one day. And at my age, you can kind of tell if the person is old or young at the other end. And it sounded like it was a youngish person. He was the head of a district in Bihar. Bihar is my home state, so I always take calls that come from Bihar. He had he had been told by somebody that maybe he should talk to us. And what he said was that, I am in charge of a small district. The district is called Jahanabad. It has about 800 or 900 schools, which is a smaller, in the range of districts, it's a small district. And it's not a very high-profile district either. He said that, I've been looking at our schools, and I feel like I've done whatever I could. We give out a lot of entitlements. There are scholarships, there are uniforms, there are cycles. We give all of these things. I've also been quite tight in terms of making sure that anybody who's supposed to show up in school shows up. But no matter what we do, the attendance of children is still not going above 60-some%. I mean, the highest attendance I seem to be able to achieve is 70%. And I'm perplexed, because I feel there's nothing more that I can do, or the system can do. And so we are stuck. So do you have any ideas about how to get out of this stuck? So as it turns out, if somebody young asks somebody older, is there something you can do? It's very rare that you will say no. In India, you say, adat se majboor hai, you feel you must offer some advice. And so, I said, well, at the core, I said, this is our belief. There are many things wrong with the world, but I think there are some things, if you look at it, what is at the core of the problem and what is on the side. One of the core issues is the children in class are not really getting anything. And that leads to disengagement by kids. And kids in rural schools can really vote with their feet. If you're not interested, you can just walk out of the door, and there's more interesting things to do outside. So kids are getting disengaged. If you're a teacher, no matter at what level, and your students are not enjoying themselves or not gaining, you get demotivated. And parents who are watching this whole thing become disenchanted with this whole process of schooling, because often they have not been to school themselves and they have high hopes about what is going to happen inside, but watching how the teachers are and how the kids are. So all around, things seem to be in a low-level kind of a stuck situation. And if you ask me, the low attendance is a indication that things are not quite gelling. Kids are usually not very excited about getting a scholarship, not at the age of 8 or 9 or 10. Older kids, like the ones here, are. But younger kids, they're also not very excited about entitlements. Entitlements are usually targeted at parents. And so if the kids are not coming, then there is something that the kids are not getting. And so if you think about that, how can we do something in the classroom that makes it worthwhile for kids to come? And a simple thing, because of the history of what we had been doing, I said if kids feel they're making progress in class, then they come. I mean, that's a very common sense thing. And because of the young man's enthusiastic voice, I said, I'm in Bihar very often. So in a couple of days, why don't we meet? We'll come to your district. So we went to his district, actually 2 days later, because I was kind of curious to see whether this was just a random conversation or it led to anything. And when we arrived, he had some papers on his desk. And what he had done on his own was actually to take a look with his own team at about 10 or 20 schools in which they looked at what are kids in different grades actually able to do. And he came to the conclusion himself that part of the reason of why things were not working out was that there was a very low level of simple things like being able to read or do math even in 5th grade. So when we sat down, there was no reason for me to even invoke the Asar report or start. He had already kind of gone beyond the obvious explanations for why things were not working to really trying to look at what is the core of teaching and learning, and that was the problem. And our discussion therefore started at what could we do to transform that. And his view was that, you've done work like this in many places, so how about you come train our teachers and turn everything around? To which I said, well, you're a small district, but you have 800 or 900 schools, which means you have at least 3 teachers in every school, and this is not a job for somebody from the outside to do. We have to think about how the system itself can turn itself around. So what were the ideas to do that? Now, for those of you who are familiar with India, you'll know that there is a layer above the schools within the government system called cluster coordinators, and each of them are responsible for about anywhere between 12, 15, depends. I mean, anything between 12 and 20 schools. And these people were originally placed with an idea that they would be able to lead work in the schools. But because I think we've been for the last at least 20 years or more in a phase in which we've been putting in inputs, doing construction, bringing in new people, they've kind of turned into data collectors and accounting people for whether the inputs are in place. So over the years, they are the ones who actually have any dealings with the school, but the dealings tend to be of a checklist type, where you go in and you inspect and you bring back. So our suggestion was, how about, because these are the only people who actually have daily interaction with schools, and if they are not motivated to bring about whatever change we want, it's hard for individual schools to change. So the decision was that we work with this lot, and even in a large district, these are, if you look at how many people there were I think in that district, less than 100 or 150 such people. So we started working right away, and I was also impressed with this gentleman's zeal to say, if we've thought of a problem and we are going to embark on a solution, then let's start tomorrow. And tomorrow only because that day was the afternoon, so you couldn't start. I mean, literally, we didn't start tomorrow, but we started within a week. And all we bargained for was to say, give us about 3 weeks. We want to have an interaction with your cluster coordinators for a couple of days. And then we want them to be actually doing what we would like teachers to do. If these guys are able to do it and are convinced that what we are suggesting is the thing to do, then we'll go ahead. And if not, it'll have been a good adventure, and we can say goodbye and all retreat to our, if you were in India, you'd say retreat back to the pavilion. That's what cricketers do when they get out. The first day, and I'm telling you the story in some detail because I think the devil is in the details. So the first day, we sat down with these people, and in a typical Indian bureaucratic setup, they were all a little put out that some fellows had arrived from somewhere and they were being made to listen to these outsiders. And those of you who know Pratham will know that almost everybody in Pratham is under 25 other than me. And so then they were being talked to by some extremely young people who pretended to know or seemed to know what they were talking about. So this all creates a little bit of unease to begin with. And what we said is, we started going down, a couple of things. And I remember saying, tell me what attendance in your school, in an average school in your district, what would attendance be like? And they were bang on the dot because they'd been really focusing on attendance. And they said, on a bad day, 50%, on a good day, 70%. Okay? And then we said, what do you think kids in fifth grade can read? And they said, well, there are some children who can't, because of various reasons. But about 70% of kids, those who come to school do learn, and so the number is somewhere between 60 or 70%. So we let it be at that, and what we did immediately after that was to go to nearby schools and come back with the actual situation in those schools. And when we came back, each team that went to a school just put their number next to the attendance and the learning numbers. And the attendance numbers were exactly as per their predictions, and the learning numbers were way off. Way off, meaning they were really far out. In many schools, in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, they could find less than 25% or 30% kids who could read. And I think that led to this first moment which said, I visit schools all the time, I thought I knew my kids, but clearly there's a big gap here which is, which has come out, and that we need to do something about this. And the whole unease in the situation kind of went in a different direction to say, okay, now what can be done? Because if you are in 5th grade and you're still struggling with very basic things, so where should we start and what should we do, and so on and so forth. So next couple of days were spent on figuring out what activities you'll do. And what we say is leave the whole school day as it is, but reserve like maybe an hour or 2 to work on some of these foundational things. It's very difficult when you turn everything upside down all at the same time. So turn a little bit upside down, because you have to do a little bit of changes. And let's see how far we get with this stuff, the activities or the methods that we are saying in about 2 weeks' time. And, people started, there were 2 or 3 cluster coordinators in each school. Kids were divided by the level at which they were. And it follows very easily from the assert tool, the way it is done. And I remember going to a school which was in the middle of rice fields on all sides. And there was one of these guys who was in his 50s, had been a teacher, and, thought of himself as a, reasonably good professional. And I went to his class. The hour of the hour and a half that was given for this was the last hour and a half of the day, because the district administration felt that anyway after lunchtime everybody goes home, so you may as well use the hours that are sort of wasted anyway. So first thing this gentleman said to me, it's very puzzling. 10 days are over, and there are things happening that I don't understand. So I said, what kinds of things? He said, there are more children in my class in this last hour of the day than in the morning. I don't understand why that is. There are kids who are not talking at all on the first day, and they're talking all the time. I don't know what that is. What is causing this change? So I jokingly said to him, why didn't you look around? And he actually looked around, and there was nothing around. There was just rice fields around and him and the kids. So I said, what do you think the reason could be? He said, that's what's puzzling me. I can't figure out what has brought about the change. And so very politely I said to him, do you think it could be you? And this was somebody who had been in the school system for a long time, was absolutely shocked and said, maybe you're right. And this idea that you could actually be doing something that could bring about a big fundamental change. And the fundamental change was kids wanted to come. This time was put aside for grades 3, 4, and 5. And you had to fight hard to keep the first and second graders out. They were hanging in through the windows. They wanted to come and sit down. They clearly could see that something was going on and they were being left out. Anyway, so the long and the short of it was that across the board, not every single person, but many people kind of went over this I don't know what to call it, the curve or the line, which got them to believe, number one, there is a problem. It's a real problem. I can see it. I can feel it. And number two, this problem is not so complicated that I can't solve it. There are things that I'm doing, and the real thing was you just mixed up the kids instead of by grade and by level. You mixed them up by level, so you didn't worry about whether they were 3rd or 4th or 5th grade kids. And what you did was you started from where they were rather than starting from where the grade curriculum was. The grade curriculum was far above them. And you started from there. You did a bunch of simple activities that got them to start talking and engaging and participating. And I'm making it sound simple. It's a little bit more hard work than this. But in 15 days' time, almost everybody felt that they'd brought about a significant change in the way the kids were interacting with them. And parents had begun to talk, saying something weird is going on. The kids don't play in the afternoon. They run back to school. Strange. What's going on? Everybody was a little bit skeptical. And so really based on this, we took the next step of saying that if you think you're convinced, can you now work with your own schools? And then, the story carried on. And I want to just show you where should I be looking here? So this is I mean, in a very crude way, when we started with these kids in grades 3, 4, and 5, only about a little under 30% could actually read words, simple words, everyday words. And as the school year went on, there are of course holidays and so on and so forth. But if you look at the number of days that we had some instruction, it was about 80 days. We found that a large number, it was a little under 70%, it was like a little bit more than 70% could read. Now, reading was just the thing that you measured. What was very remarkable, and which all the teachers talked about, is that there was a lot of talk. The classroom became very noisy because everybody wanted to talk about what they had read, they had things to say, they could work in groups, all sorts of other things began to happen. This is just a simple, I think this was just a way in which I wanted to just bring to you kind of big problem, kind of a straightforward solution. It didn't require anybody extra resources at all. The district was quite, I would say, proactive. So for that 1 hour, if there were teachers in nearby schools that had more teachers, they would shift people around. They did a bunch of things with parents as well. But even if they hadn't done some of the extra things, it just took the people that they had in the system, reorganized them. There was a goal that we want everybody to read a simple story by the end of this period. And people were kind of, organized around that goal, and that's how it went on. Now, if I move to a kind of a bigger picture behind all of this, and we take a look at what India has gone through in the last 10, and even extend this to 20, 25 years, there have been very big changes that have happened. In terms of, policies, we've got new laws, expenditure on education by the government has really gone up, and all of this has happened in the last, couple of years. I mean, the last 2 decades or so. And just for the last 10 years, even if you look at absolutely the crude measures, number of schools, number of teachers, and the last one is a very interesting one, because even 10 years ago, just go back, roughly in India, if you look at the 2011 census, you have about 25 million kids at each age. So age 10, you have 25 million, age 11, you have around 25, roughly, that's the number. So 10 years ago, only about half of the kids who could have gone to 8th grade were making it to there. And in a 10-year period, it's like almost everybody who can get to 10th grade, till 8th grade is getting it. So 24 million are going now. There's probably about 1 million or 1.5 million who are not there. It's a huge change. Partly it's fueled by the fact that we have a compulsory education law, which says everybody can make it to 8th grade, can have 8 years of schooling, and this is a result of that. But I think it's also a change in aspirations, change in provisioning, a change in many of the things that you see which are behind what is going on. Now, if you ask me, are all children in school in India? The answer is, as I say, both yes and no. Enrollment levels are very high. For the age group 6 to 14, which is a compulsory education age group, almost everybody is in school. But I asked some kids once, I remember, in a 6th grade school, I said to them, what does enrollment mean? And I got the best definition of enrollment ever. One kid said that enrollment means that our names are in school. And we are also in school sometimes. So enrollment numbers are very high, and I think that's why we should, as you reach these kind of high numbers, you should stop thinking about enrollment, because enrollment means everybody's names have arrived. The question is, has everybody arrived? And the answer for everybody arriving is in this map. You probably can't see the numbers, but green is you're close to the enrollment levels, and red is you're far away. So in the far away, if you look at that middle belt, that's like 50-60%, which means on any given day, half the kids who ought to be there are there. The question is, on the next day, is it the same half or different half? Because in terms of actually teaching, this makes a difference as to who is in classroom. If it's the same 50%, it's in a way easier, because you know you have to deal with the other 50% in some Similarly, we need to now work at making it stick, which was a problem I think that Jahanabad came across and wondered what to do to make them stick. This is also quite well known that private school going has increased every single year. And you see this absolutely in 10 years' time, it's going from under 20% to well above 20%. This data is from Asar and it's rural. So this doesn't take into account what is happening even in the smaller cities. This is all only rural areas. In the cities, the situation can be more pronounced than we see here. And interestingly, there's a lot of talk in India and everywhere else about private schools, but the variation that we see across states and across grades is quite interesting. I haven't had a chance to put it here, but even if you look at the northwest of India, it's got a lot of private school growth. Why is that? Is the weather there conducive to private schools? It's not clear. They don't have communist governments there, but our communist governments are very, so you see, Punjab, for example, has not grown very fast. But Uttar Pradesh has gone from 30% to well above 50% in this period. And you see in Uttar Pradesh growth for every grade in every district across the board. But there are differences. There are states in which there's big growth in primary school for private schooling, but everybody comes back to government school for middle school. In other places, you see the opposite. So there is, for those of you who are looking for a PhD topic, this private school enrollment and the causes and the trends behind it is not a straightforward story. And very few people in India, it's such an ideological thing between private and government, that somehow people don't want to get deeper into the trends and patterns that follow. On the eastern side of India, where private schooling is very low, in Assam we look at are you going to private coaching or tuition? And that is extremely high. So, whether the organizational structures for school or coaching class, if you take the coaching or the tuition part of it into it, you see a pretty high private input, additional input into schooling everywhere. So some go to government school in the morning and private tuition in the afternoon. Or all kinds of combinations of how people are supplementing what they're making. And I think that also comes from the mindset that more is better. So put your kids into school earlier and earlier because more schooling is going to get you further. Pump your kids with more schooling inputs. I think these are all aspirations. They're coming from places where you feel like education is the way to go. And the more education you get, in the same unit of time or space or whatever it is, will help. So in the West Bengal, for example, you find that even in first grade, well above 60% kids go to some kind of tutor in. And I think that perhaps the really most interesting story in Indian education is not in the schools, but is in this whole, like in manufacturing, it's in this whole unorganized, potentially dynamic sector that is unregulated and completely unstudied, that lies outside. Coming to the main thing that we work on, and this is a slide that Molly here doesn't want to see, because she was looking apparently when I arrived here this morning, she picked me up. Molly Banerji, hands up, everybody knows who you are. And she informed me that she actually looked for a job at present. And whoever it is, very strict, who interviewed her made a test. And since she couldn't get to this test, she was not given the job. As payment to coming here, I've decided I'm going to teach her, I'm going to teach the test. It's a well-known practice. So that Molly can make it to brother the next time.
It gives me anxiety.
When I sent this slide to her this afternoon, she wrote back to me using slide 6. Very funny. So this is actually the Asar test. We do this all over India. Why is it so simple? We've been criticized a lot, and I'm sure some people here also think this is way too simple. Education is about many more things. It's not just about really every things. But it's been a very useful tool for all kinds of things. We originally came up with it because it helps us instructionally in improving things. As it turned out, as we use it more and more, we found it was very easy for parents to engage, to ask what is it that kids should be getting in school. Very often people feel that, especially parents who not had much education, that whatever is in the book is what the kid should know. But whatever is in the book is very difficult. it is talk about it, discuss it, write stuff like this on your own. And then this is, the other thing it does is it doesn't scare you, other than one. That this seems doable. I mean, if you just put your mind to it and focus on it, you should be able to take things to this. So we found it to be a very useful actually mobilization tool to be able to get people to engage on what does the first step of learning mean and how you can participate, because it's not that difficult. We're talking about a big problem, but it's not an insoluble issue. But the problem as it stands today is like this. That if I look at third grade kids, so this long story is at the second grade level. If I look at third grade kids, it tells me that about 25% of kids who go to third grade have actually been able to cope with second grade stuff. And as you go further down, you see even in 8th grade, there are 25% kids, and these are both private and government school kids in rural areas, who are still struggling with basic simple reading. And again, by reading, it's a proxy for everything else that comes with it. This is just an easy way to look at it. So we have a big problem. This is what the problem looks like. A much more sophisticated way of getting more in depth about the problem. But as you see from our story from Jahanabad, it's not a problem that can't be solved. So if we move to kind of just thinking a little bit more about broader pictures, the Indian school system is structured very much like most other schools. Our basic structure is age graded. I think most school systems in the world have some kind of age grade structure. I had just an aside, I remember asking my father once, and my father was a very respected person because he got his PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. He must be right. So I once asked him around school, I was kind of at school, what about his education about? And he said education is what remains after you've forgotten everything. So, one of our professors at the University of Chicago said that the last innovation in education was the age grade structure. And that happened, I think, in like 200 years ago. There hasn't been any major innovation in education ever since. So, India, like everybody else, structures the school system by age grade. When you're in age 6, you're supposed to be in first grade. When you're age 14, you're supposed to be in 8th grade. That's our, and that's the assumption on which the entire system is built. Every year, you have a different set of curricular expectations. The way people understand it is the textbooks. Textbooks are linear, they're building on what you've learned every year. And that stepwise way of proceeding is how most school systems and ours are constructed. But what is the reality? Because in the end, it's the reality which dictates what is possible. What we are setting up as goals, maybe are the curriculum standards and so on. We see, when we look at even simple data like ASR data, you see that we have a law which says 6 to 14 is you enter school at 6. So presumably you are in first grade at 6. The reality, and you can look at the ASR data state by state, very large numbers of children are in school well before 6. In some states, there are large chunk of first graders are 4. But what you're expected to do in first grade is build on certain assumptions about the age and the cognitive ability and your ability to improve. So in many ways, this rising aspiration of parents who don't have much education, you're putting in kids earlier and earlier into school. And in fact, the earlier you come into school, and where do you go in school? First place you go is first grade. I mean, if you're a middle class person, you may go to day school or nursery school or whatever. But if you are a average person in a rural area, you go to first grade. But first grade already may be far above what you at that age can do. So assumption 1 itself, that your starting point, if you look at private school kids, the one thing that private schools do, I'm not a proponent of one or the other, but what private schools do is rarely do they take you into first grade. To enter private schools, even rural private schools, you can enter at some kindergarten or lower. We have many grades of kindergarten, upper KG, lower KG, middle KG, all sorts of things. So as to kind of, you spend some time before you come to first grade. I'm not sure what happens in those kindergartens is great, but it does delay your first grade curriculum landing on your head. And therefore, private school kids in first grade tend to be often 2 years older than government school kids. And if you're in a state where your early preschool system from the government side is weak, then the chances that you come to school have big pushes for universal education, universalizing of education. I think, I don't know if other countries have this, but this we certainly see in India. Very early onset of schooling, which can be detrimental to your next goal. The second one, which you've already seen, is, no, which you haven't seen, but it's very easy from the other data, who is in which grade at which age. And again, if you start at a different age, then you're already, all through your school life, you're too early. And in places where you have large chunks of children who weren't in school, then you have a lot of overage kids as well. So if you look across India, the age and the grade distribution, again, it's quite varied. The southern states, which have better birth registration, more structured school systems, more educated parents, have a much narrower band of age and grade going through the system. Northern states, which have had much more larger numbers of out-of-school children in the past, have very broad bands of who is in which grade, which again brings up challenges for anyone who could actually teach them. And finally, if you look at, which I'll show you on the next slide, I think, this is just the USER table for reading for grades 3, 4, and 5. And to just illustrate what the problem is, the highest level, which is you're able to read a simple story, and you can probably read higher because you don't measure higher than that. 50% roughly of kids in 5th grade can do that. So let's say that 50% is somewhere, towards, because if you can read, you can do a lot of things yourself. If you can't read, you have to read help. If you can read, you can actually read a 4th grade textbook as well. If you can read and if you have the confidence to say, I don't understand, you're pretty much insured. And you have, and you're able to get up and put your hand in class and say, I didn't get it, say it to me again. And that's a good skill. It probably works well on this campus as well. That the ability to be able to say, I didn't get it. But what about the rest? So you think about a 5th grade teacher in India, a good 5th grade teacher, a good meaning, expected behavior of a 5th grade teacher in India is that she picks up a 5th grade textbook and she teaches from it. And by the end of the year, she finishes what she should have taught from the textbook in that year. But who is she teaching? She's teaching this big tail of the distribution. About 6% of her kids can't even read letters yet. So teaching from the 5th grade textbook is, they are the first ones to go home and start reading. Then you have another about 13% who can sort of read letters but can't even read words. Another chunk who can read words but not say. So really what you need in 5th grade is a lot of different kinds of treatment to bring kids up to level. The advantage of 5th grade is you're older, and if somebody makes an effort to pick it up very quickly. But someone has to take the time out and make the effort. So what we have been doing, and the example that I gave you from Jahanabad, is take the same school, the same teachers, the same kids. Traditional school systems are organized by rows, right? This is the row, that is it. And turn that into each by columns. So I have, and these kids are anyway mixed up in age, and very often in India, 60% of schools have more than one grade street together anyway. So this mixing up is nothing unusual, they're already mixed up. You will systematize the mixing up, and we see that in about, depending on how much you're teaching, but certainly in less than 100 hours of teaching, this whole thing can turn into something that has most kids being able to read. So this is something that's possible even with our current level of teachers, parents, students, classrooms, resources. You don't need to bring anything more to you in here. So then, why did it happen? So it's such an easy story, and I'm such a rocket scientist. Why though, if you're not living outside, how do you do this? This could be a good question, right? This is a question why I've come all the way from India to here. Why is this not happening? If there is, and by the way, this, what I'm telling you is not just my story, it's been, there's the randomized control trials, there's all sorts of other things. You like randomized control trials, we have those, we don't like those, more stories, we have those, we have any kind of So it's a proven and independently assessed model, and this does happen. So then why aren't we doing it? And now this is all just my personal analysis of the Indian macro cycle. So you can put it aside if you don't like it. But I think that there has been the right to education law that was passed, which was passed in 2010, unless things are in place, how can you expect quality? You have to have enough teachers, you have to have enough textbooks, unless you have all these inputs in place. So I call them that they're preoccupied with inputs. Waiting for all inputs to happen before really any big transformation of teaching learning can happen. Then I'm lumping people together because I don't know how much time I have, but yeah, just to get the big picture out. Then there's a whole group of people, and often our bureaucrats fall into this, especially if they're from IIT. So we have a techno-managerial approach that, if you only had biometrics, everybody would know. Who came in where, who breathed where, all of it. There are others who believe the right incentives, give somebody another 500 rupees, and energy will be unleashed to perform better. So again, I think there's truth to some of these, but there's a whole chunk which means tighter monitoring, better administration, and all of this is true. We have a very lax, loose system doing what we want. So we could benefit from a number of these things. And we have no accountability, because somebody doesn't come, nobody cares. So there's a whole chunk of people who feel only if all of this could be tightened, the whole system would start moving again. Another school, these are not competing. These are all, this is moving that whole complex system where nothing, unless you change all moving parts, nothing will move. What about these teachers? There are all sorts of stories in the press, in popular media. The teachers can't teach. They have, they're doing all sorts of things. They don't show up. So there is not only that there is all these administrative issues, but capability-wise, just like we have first-generation learners, we have first-generation teachers. We never had, 8 million teachers ever in the history of India. How to manage those 8 million teachers, everyone's struggling with. And so this is a long-term institutional change. You have to get big loans from the World Bank, build teacher training institutions, 20 years back, fabulous. But until then, it's going to be cheap, right? So that's another school of thought. And then there's people like us who believe that take the place there is, use it to maximum opportunity, build some positive energy in the system, and then take the next step. That this whole development is not a big bang. It happens with, take an inch park a car, take 2 inches park a bus, and move in that way. And occasionally you'll be thrown out, and occasionally you'll get more space. And this is the way to move. Many of you may be familiar with Dan Pritchett, who's an economist at Harvard, I guess. And the nicest thing about that is that he has fantastic titles to his papers. If you read the title of the paper, if you're like me, you don't read the paper, but the title says dog. And one of his papers, I think, is it's a really good paper, so you should read it. You're still in graduate school, I'm not. It says the negative consequences of an over-ambitious curriculum. So what is consequences of this over-ambitious curriculum? Not only that they are very low learning levels today, but the pathways as these kids go through the system is very flat. So if you don't learn the foundational stuff in the beginning, the chances that in 5th grade somebody is going to teach you how to read letters is practically zero. So you can almost predict that by 2nd or 3rd grade, you can almost see that it is that 20% in 3rd grade can read who has a fighting chance to get to the end of the school system. And then, affordability issues will come and even lesser percent will go. So that if you don't do something about that piece, then. So I'll just finish up by, if you have long plane rides and you learn how to do animation, then that's what happens. So today, we are now in April. The new government, which is soon becoming not so new government, is in the process of formulating a new education policy. And they were supposed to have released it in December. And so presumably sometime this year, it will be announced. Will it have a much bigger component of learning, regardless of what is the pathway that we need to get there, than before? And I call it, is there really a climate change in education, or is it does policy change actually lead to any practice change? Or will a large-scale practice change actually lead to a policy change? In some ways, the right to education is practices or changes when the law changes. You already had 96% of children in school before you had a compulsory education law. And perhaps in other countries too, this is the case, that things become law. Sometimes things become law, but they're actually pretty much part of the reality. And so it's really for the last 10% that the law comes into play. So what is the relationship that we see here between policy and practice, and which comes first, or does all of this happen at the same time, or at different pace for different people? What are the political imperatives for changing practice? Now, the current government, who hasn't made any pronouncement really majorly about elementary education or school education, all the stuff that's been happening is on higher education. What is to be the political shift? My own home state of Bihar is a very good example of why there's a lot of political backing behind education. And I don't know if people have done a detailed analysis, but I think it's really worth studying what the last 10 years of Nitish Kumar have done for schooling. Learning will be an agenda that will follow, but it's been a policy in which actually it's not an education policy, it's a women policy. And thereby focusing in a very big way on girls and women in many different ways, including in terms of making an enabling environment for girls to go to school. You see a huge change in girls' enrollment in school, girls continuing up to secondary, and in addition to that, you have female affirmative action for women in local elections. You have affirmative action for women at a very high level, 50% level for government employment. You have very strong support for women's microfinance and self-help groups, and maybe these are not straight line causation, massive prohibitions, which is just smash all the legal in Bihar. All of these are leading to a consistently higher female vote in each election. So do you need a much bigger political strategy into which the education part fits to really have some big fundamental changes go on? Bihar is a good example. Some of the new states, Delhi is a very interesting example. I'm throwing out all these PhD topics, so somebody needs to go study this. Delhi is also, really they've doubled their education budget. The finance minister is the education minister. They're loudly proclaiming that education must change. 3 years down the road, it will be very interesting to see what led from their policy or pronouncements to actual change. And then finally, this whole private action in India is also, I think, there is a lot beneath the surface that needs to be studied. Because there's clearly a lot of, by private, everybody automatically assumes all kinds of interests. But I think parents are private players also. And parental ambition and parental strategies for what they're doing also accounts to a whole set of activities that are happening around the institutional system and in many ways, if you look closely at private school practices, they are way more conservative than what's happening in the government sector. So apart from the absolute top end, which have the comfort of being very innovative, your mom into science, math, the ability of much of us to deliver that to kids is probably quite limited. So what would be a possible pathway to enable kids to access the world at large, keeping in mind that we have some strengths, we know how to organize people, but we don't necessarily know how to teach higher level things. So in about 200 villages in UP, starting 3 years running, and I think I'll describe it to you, and then I think that raises some interesting opportunities. So kids have been given tablets. And these tablets are about 6,000 to 7,000 rupee tablets, about $100 tablets. And they come preloaded with stuff. And the stuff is lots of stuff, whatever stuff is out there. It's often, there are videos there which show you NASA, space, in space, how to eat a sandwich in space. And it's just amazing. You can look at it and think, how do you, what do you call it in English? Take a towel which is wet and drain it. What happens to the water that comes out? Stuff like that. There are conversational English. So there was no attempt to make a curriculum. There was just a lot of visual material in this space. The more interesting part is that kids have been organized in neighborhood groups. So wherever lot of kids you play, that's your group in your neighborhood. And the tablet is placed with some adult that is attached like a mom or an older brother or sister. So the tablet is careful. And there's no instruction. So you take the tablet, and we thought that kids would use it a couple of times a week. We find the following. This is UP where attendance in school is around 50–55%. The attendance, so the kids mark their own attendance, in these groups is 80–90. Almost every kid is there every day. Not only are they there every day, we have some columns where we mark guests. When you bring your friends along, there's a large amount of friends coming to be with you when you're with the tablets. Meticulously collected information that the kids do themselves. Secondly, we find that kids are, and it's been a real problem with measurement, because you saw our measurement. It's very, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here, all kinds of things are happening that they find it very difficult to measure. I was visiting one of these villages, and the kid said to me, English. So I said, yeah, it's okay. We'll show you a video that we have made. So there were English videos in the tablet, which were actually quite bad. There were 2 kids saying, hello, I'm Rukmini. You're? And they said, how are you? Shall we play? Goodbye. This is a little conversation. And firstly, everybody in the village is saying these things. So, you think about what the village wanted to say. But secondly, the kids showed me videos that they had made of themselves, which were far better than the videos that were seen in the video. They had taken nice bed covers hanging up at the back, worn really nice clothes, practiced this conversation so it wasn't as vulgar as it is in the video. And they actually, nobody taught them how to film. Remember, these were the same kids who could not read a word 50 days ago, were now making movies. They had science experiments which are on the videos. There is a well-known scientist called Untitled Chapter. He has wonderful short videos that, really short videos that will do with just complicated things. And one of these, in another group, the kid said, so I said, which one, what's your favorite subject? And they said, science. What's so nice about science? They said, well, you can do stuff. So what can you do? And they wanted to show me an experiment. And the experiment involved, I forget what it was, I'm not particularly science myself, but it had a leaf, it had a bowl, it had water, it had a magnet, and something was not supposed to say. So they started showing it to me all the time. And there was a lot of frustration because they were performing and wasn't going well. And there were moms and aunts who were standing in the back because this happened at home. And one of the moms, she had her head covered and she just flipped it up and said, come on, let me do it. And she actually did the experiment. And she did it right. And she did exactly like how it's, And then she was sort of shocked. And she said, I actually didn't know that I knew it. But I sit with the kids every day. And so I figured out that, this kid is super educated. Now, all kinds of we've been measuring some of their learning, but I think it raises a big question about whether once you build the foundational building blocks, we really need to move in some other way to the next level, which enables, yes, there's a tablet involved, there's some amount of social organization involved, but it costs a lot less than what's going on in the schools today. And whether the schools should be used really for some other So, question mark is, what is the model that we want for us to go forward? And a final question that I want to leave for us to think about, and it's talked about a little bit in India, but really not as much, that our compulsory education law takes you till 14. So you could be in school till 14, or till 8th grade. Our labor laws don't allow you to work in the organized sector in your 18. So there's a 14 to 18, and that, if you say there's 25 million kids at each age group, that's 100 million kids. And we haven't really thought about what we should be doing with them. We talk about skilling, but many of the skilling initiatives today in India require your 10th grade. So there's a big chunk, I think, waiting for what should we do with this, because clearly the kids are very capable. The low capability seems to be us, who are not able to imagine how to.
Rukmini will take any questions. Yes. If you can press that speaker there.
Oh, speaker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you speak sort of into it? You just press it. Yeah.
I'm basically myself an engineer, and I retired about 10 years back, near about Philadelphia. And since then, I'm spending about 5 months in India, and particularly working in villages, and also in education to some extent. I have several observations in West Bengal. The observation is that I'm looking into these kids the last 15, 20 years. And initially I saw the elementary school classes are very crowded. And some school has one teacher, some school has two, but classes are crowded. And recently, about 10 years back, one NGO started a school. And they will have to pay 100 rupees a month as a tuition, whereas the government school is free. And everybody, all the parents are rushing into the school, 100 parents spending 100 rupees per month. And this year I went to school. In the last grade, in one school, there were 2 students enrolled. Everybody went to that school. And that school is covered. Class is 40, 50 students in the class. And this government school, empty. And also, the other thing is, the government school teacher is getting, primary school teacher is getting 25 rupees, 20,000 rupees per month. Whereas, those teachers are getting only 4,000 rupees a month. What a difference. And this is a huge problem in West Bengal. And also, attendance is midday meal. I think I say everywhere now. Midday meal is another attraction, and because of midday meal, attendance is gone.
Can you take a feed? Yeah. Yes.
My question is about the teacher motivation. So in the schools, particularly in the rural areas, in the government schools, what do you think really motivates teachers to be good teachers in the classrooms?
Good. Molly?
Actually, related to that, I'm wondering if you try to strike a balance between working with the government in policy and law and decentralizing education, because it seems that that's a great opportunity for innovation and autonomy to come in, autonomy for the schools, for the individual teachers, and that's where motivation comes in.
Don't take it.
So just to respond to that, I think the point that you made really illustrates the fact that this government school, private school tuition, it's all, there is a market. In the village, there is a number of kids and there is a number of teachers. Sometimes they are in this school, sometimes they are in that school, and we haven't really explored what are the possibilities of an optimal distribution of all of it. And in West Bengal, in fact, because this phenomena is actually, very prevalent. I remember a couple of years ago, in a village, exactly the same situation. One school, 300 kids, 3 teachers, or some number like that. And kids would go in the morning are reserving their spot in the school, for the day. So, and everybody's talking about how bad the teacher-student ratio is, and that's why I'm doing it. So I remember asking, there was a big group in that village, and I said, how many people do tuition or coaching? So in that village, there were 35 people who did tuition or coaching, and almost every kid also went to, they had a name in the school, which meant in the government school, the ratio of student to teacher was 1 to 100, let's say. But if you take all 35, and I'm just simplifying, then the ratio is 1 to 10. So I asked all the people who were talking to me, there were at least 15 tutors in that group. So I said, so who does it full time, who does it part time? And then there was a distribution. There were some people who were full time tutors, and others who did it as supplement to livelihood or seasonal or other things. Or often they were college students who were earning something extra. What subjects do you teach? Everybody teaches everything. Now, clearly this is not an optimal organization of the talent pool in the village, even if I get away from government and private. And, we started talking, and then my colleague stopped me saying, stop, this is leading to trouble. To say, you could federate this structure. There must be people, and and in West Bengal actually, especially for high school, there are famous tutors. People know who is a good tutor in such and such village who does math really well. And outside his house or that location, there will be hundreds of cycles. And sometimes people are teaching with a mic because this is a well-known teacher. And we've done small studies which show that a very good teacher, especially for science and math, not in the primary but in the upper primary, can earn 30,000 rupees for fees. So what I feel is that there is a lot of in this analysis of who should study and why who. We have these mindsets that say school is good, tutor is bad, private is bad, government, whatever those are. And we should get away and look at what is the catchment area. And from the little we've done, we see for primary school kids, the catchment area is a village. But for higher order kids, it's a whole panchayat where people can get on a cycle and go somewhere. There's got to be more efficient ways with our current resources that we can deliver better. And I think this is is there anybody here from the business school? I think these are the things that really need to be studied to look at, what would be the cost versus the quality versus the equity angles of reorganizing.
The business schools don't study equity.
Going back to this, our last question. See, motivation, I think like anybody else, your motivation goes up and down depending on many things. We've seen that when you have, I'll give you a very clear example. There was a study that was done in Bihar by this JPAL lab at MIT, and it was a program that we were implementing. It was a year-long program of learning improvement. It was happening in the school, same teachers, same kids, but we were attempting to see how can we push towards grading. And we had a summer program which was very much like what I described, which said same teachers, same kids, let's build the foundation. Teacher motivation in the summer was much higher. In summer, it's 50 degrees, you're not really getting, you're giving up your holiday, but you're allowed to kind of focus on, I'm not saying every teacher was highly motivated, but we did have problems with teachers absent even during that time. And the learning gains that were made in that summer 1 month endured for 2 or 3 years and were higher than what you could do the whole year. So I think a lot of what teaching is all about, we have to look at what is doable and what is, I think we trap our teachers into a lot of useless things. This teaching to only the top of the class is not satisfying for most people. And to me, it looks like, I may be overstating the case, but if you see visible change in children in front of you, your motivation goes up regardless of what the government structure may be. There will always be some 10-20% who don't get. But I think that there's not enough effort that is made to really look at how you connect, substantial improvement in learning to everything else that happens in this. So that's my government people, by the way, don't agree with me. They say ये सब बेकार है, teachers को पढ़ाया ही नहीं and all that. But I feel that the higher levels have not invested enough. They've often invested in teachers. Like teachers union invest in teachers, but they don't invest in the teaching. If you really look at the core of what education system is all about and invest in that, which is the interaction between the children and the teachers, I think you'll get to some different solutions.
So I am actually from the business school and studying marketing
I'm amazed at your last statement that 100 million kids, which is 8% of the India's population, has no place to go. When is government of India going to pass some legislation for compulsory high school? This.
I mean, they're heading in that direction, but according to me, that's not the answer because these kids. I mean, I'll give you an example. In UP, we did in about 400 villages, we did a census of all 8th grade kids, seeing who will go to 9th grade. Because, since everybody reaches 8th grade, chances that many people will go to 9th if the school is, reasonably close, reasonably affordable. All parents said that if we can afford it, they are going to go to 9th. But when we gave the kids a simple pen and paper test at 5th grade level, 60% couldn't do it. So I can push them further and further, and they can stay further. As long as I provide for them and provide incentives, they'll stay. But is that what we want? I mean, the shock that kids have once they reach 10th grade and they fail, it's like a betrayal. And yet, it's like nobody is prepared then that this is going to happen. So you throw money at the problem, you go to as many tutors as possible, you cheat, you do, every kind of response to get to the 10th exam. But if the core is not there, this 10th exam is, today, most employers, including the top employers, don't care what school you come from, they do their own training and their own assessments. So, even if you come from an engineering school, they will do, Infosys will take you and train you again. So then why, I think we need to think about what is it that we want for a 14-year-old, an 18-year-old, and the ways to get it may not be just more of the same. We've seen, I think as a small child, going to school is part of your childhood, and all of our memories of going to school are not to do with division and multiplication, but to do with the friends you had, and the games you played, and all the socialization. But as you go higher, the capability of the institutions to deliver is not high, and we are not using perhaps other ways like I'm saying that there could be some ideas, but in the meanwhile, I think we need to really optimize what is possible today. I think much more is possible today than before. Sorry, please go for the question. No, I agree. Sorry, yeah, I think, for example, in the tuition market, for example, I think the reason that the secondary school tutors, good tutors can charge because they can be correlated to the 10th grade results. So and so who went to such and such tutor did well in the exam. So there isn't, for younger, it's hard to say whether, and you're independent as a parent. So it's hard to say whether this guy is better than that guy is better than that guy. And introduction of, like, for example, people often say to us, so the government doesn't like us. Well, government likes or doesn't like us. Private schools hate us. Because it really, in the village, when a private school kid can't read, there is quite a bit of unrest right there. Because government, okay, you don't pay, what you expect. But in private, you're paying, you're often paying hard-earned income because you want your kid to go ahead. So there isn't a, how do you know? So I think in this, better market theory, we have to have some lineation of,
Have you ever started touting the results coming in from outside?
yeah, not from outside, but if you see, for example, I've seen this in Rajasthan a lot. There will be, Rajasthan is an over-schooled state. There's lots of schools in one village. Yeah. And you'll see boards, signboards, like advertisements saying intense grade X, Y, Z from this school did well. A direct advertisement which is linking, but you can only do it because there's a 10th grade exam. And I'm not suggesting you should have a 5th grade exam just for that. But I think there have to be ways in which more people are, and that's why we think an Asar-like movement is useful because it can connect less educated parents with some awareness of what needs to be.
You touched on an issue that I explored in my own research, which is also said in the state of West Bengal, which is the role of families, the role of parents, and what happens within the household and the comparative advantage that some households have over others. And this is something that we can observe also in other developing countries. I've also done work in Brazil. And as you pointed out, often mothers who have primary education
You can only do it.
Thank you. About 4 years ago, I visited one of your schools in Mumbai, and it sounds like you're broadening your focus now versus having your own schools and having an influence more broadly. Can you just talk a little about what Prabhup's trying to do in the broader education environment?
You go and take this too, or shall I?
Maybe one more.
Okay. Yes.
You talked a little bit about the view of government as being not, not being able to accept intergovernment. So then I thought you were about how people didn't realize they had a right to demand out of schools to the government because they didn't see the government being funded by themselves instead of having a state. Do you think that view has changed, that mentality has changed in these schools that are now, or do you think there's any hope for change in the future for better accountability for the government in these schools?
So maybe I can combine. So one is, what can be done? Firstly, do you believe that uneducated parents get gone? And if so, what can be done to offset? If you look at we've had some form of parent-teacher, so whatever, village education committee, parent-teacher association, that kind of thing for a long time. And there are funds which are demarcated for actually building the capability. Teachers get 20 days of training in a year or 10 days of training in a year, and there's 1 or 2 days earmarked for those. And I haven't seen any systematic studies, but it would be interesting to see that over the last 10 years, which states actually spent that money and spent that money to train whom. Because I think that's an indication that you believe that working with community members makes a difference. I think again, I'm more familiar, and I've worked a lot in Bihar, so I can use that example. I think this broad spectrum approach to say women matter has had a lot of effects on, like they ran just before, a year before, or a year and a half before the last census, Bihar ran a very big female literacy campaign. And it was clearly intended to raise the literacy figures for the census, and they explicitly said so. But in doing so, with the actual implementation of the program, the stated objective was not necessarily literacy. The stated objective was that people who don't speak will learn to speak. They get confidence to demand. Whether they actually did demand or not, there was a push for some form of women getting more confident to do certain things. The materials that went in, I don't think there was a big increase in literacy. There was an increase in literacy as self-reported, but I think there was a bigger boost which went to self-help groups, daughters going to school, stuff like that. So it would be interesting to trace what is happening at a macro level and what is the impetus behind those, and then what actually can happen at the ground. At the ground level, as Pratham, we have tried certain strategies which we feel are very promising. So we took very almost no vowels in lettering, which leads to actually lots of people being able to read it, engage with it. You're at that level of literacy. So I think we have not engaged with what kind of literate environment we are in and what kind of, what will be a supporting environment. And I don't think these are difficult things. You have to have a mindset which says everybody can participate. And then, things will come out. Going to your question, our rural programs are much more broad-based than the urban ones. And especially Bombay being the oldest, we still run our own preschool centers. We run, but and even in Bombay now we are partnering with the government preschool centers more than running our own. In the rural areas, we do two kinds of work. One is we will run what we call learning camps, which are this 40 days or 50 days of a camp mode of improving learning like I described. But the reason we do that is we want the core methods of this to be transplanted into the government system. So we are as big teams working with governments in that Jagadabad style as we do in running our own. And our ideal would be that we shrink what we do independently. And we need to do it independently to just refine our models, come up with new things and others, but integrate that as much as possible into whichever system. It could be the government system, it could be any other system that enables.
Dan? Yeah, Dan?
You're on the top.
Yeah. You.
Yeah. Well, my question is more in the form of a compliment.
That would
Working
be up.
on this area for a long time, I call myself a researcher, a word that didn't seem to do very well at the beginning of your talk. But I think, as everybody will recognize, your talk was filled with research and put in a wonderful, in some cases, story-like ways, but in fact very directly in other ways. And I wanted to comment back in the form of a compliment around your one of your slides, which talked about the relationship between research, policy, and practice. And I'm not sure everybody here knows that what you build as practice has actually had a very big impact on not only research, but also policy in this arena. So that if learning, and I believe it will be, is going to be central to the next Sustainable Development Goals that just literally began a few months ago, it's in large part due to profit. And the idea that, relatively speaking, localized groups, big localized groups, can have a major impact on how the world thinks about these issues. So I come away, not only from your talk, but also from our many interactions previously, with a feeling that even if there's, what's the right word, recalcitrance, perhaps, as a characterization of the Indian government vis-a-vis, let's say, learning and so on, my feeling is that we're very much on track to making it a centerpiece, and in no small measure due to profit in your own work and your colleagues' work. So I think that, and you already know because we go to some of the same meetings, that this is becoming front and center as a policy issue. Lots of resources are being put into it, and I think we should be very appreciative and even grateful for your efforts to make this such a centerpiece of world efforts in education.
But I think time is also right for that.
I'm saying it's right for that in part because. Dot, dot, dot.
Yes. I have two questions here. Yes.
My question is with regard to India is a country that when I think of India, I think of the great linguistic diversity within the country, and I also, having spent some time there, realize now what kind of migration is happening within India. And so my question is really about how do you navigate, and how does Pratham, or how do you see navigating supporting students in their first language or a language that they know, especially in light
Yes.
My question to you regarding the National Achievement Survey conducted by NCRT, and given that NCRT is a national governing body, I'm just trying to understand how does that impact USER's result, and if it does, then how does USER plan to navigate or gain more recognition from the government and excellence?
Yeah. So on the language front, I think, I think we all recognize there are many layers of language. So in terms of kind of the, medium of instruction language, if we as the government or whoever, we work in the main regional language of the area. But the real question is, what is, is that the second language or the third language of the place? In 1 year, Asra, we asked what language you speak at home and what language you go to school in. And we use only the 125, I forget now, there's all levels of language categorization. We use the 125, what is this word for it? There's a, whatever, list A languages. And you found that, in many, my perception was that on border districts, in the northeast of India, in Kashmir, there are mainstream groups who have different languages. But the data showed us that if we had known better, we would have known that the main language diversity was in the Hindi heartland. That nobody actually speaks Hindi in India. So, now that nobody speaks Hindi in India, well, okay, so what do you do? And I think we've been very poor at really handling some of that. One way that we kind of get around that is that if you have absolutely local people working with local kids, then they will navigate in a way that they do. But recently we started in any area which has, where you're working with young kids, kind of looking more closely at what language you speak in, what language you play in, what scripts are there. So in Jharkhand, for example, I remember going to a school where, and I like to think of myself as a, engaging speaker. But clearly I wasn't in that class. Everybody was just completely non-responsive. And these were small kids. And usually, it's much more lively. And I realized they don't understand Hindi at all. So when you spoke to them in Bangla, they responded. However, when you showed them Bangla script, they were blank. So they speak Bangla, but they can read Hindi script. There is no material which is Bengali material written in Hindi. And yet in the same village, there were people who were Santali, so they spoke Santali and they had, So I think we've done not much work on this whole language in terms of written, oral, and context. We've got a couple of projects where we are going deeper, but one of the first things we think before working in an area, do a language mapping thoroughly. Just so that you understand how complex it is, and even though your solution may be skimming the surface, you're aware of what more needs to be done. So in this female project that I was talking about, we found that even the same language group, there were Santali language groups in the same neighboring villages use different vocabulary for different things. Now, we absorbed a lot of it, we used a bit of it, but really this is a whole, I think, a much bigger. Now, the main people studying school and languages in India, there's a lot of people studying that in Odisha. And there, there's been an interesting development where academics, there's a very diverse group of people focusing on language. I think that's necessary. It's not just a linguistic thing. There's a cultural angle, there's an academic angle, there's what language, So, 1,000 years of research required. But even, simple slices, I think, would be extremely useful in knowing. Now, kids, for example, I've had times when you would write how they speak and then give it to the kids to read. So I do this in Bhojpuri all the time. You write what the kids are seeing in Bhojpuri, which is the language in Bihar, and the kids laugh and say, that's not what you write, that's what you say. Even kids know that there are oral languages and there are written languages, and so what do you do with that data? The kids will not read it. They'll just say, this is not like this. You're not supposed to do this. Don't you know? Yeah. So NCRT, NCRT does the National Achievement Survey. They are pen and paper surveys. In a country where 60% can't read, so what does the pen and paper survey do? I think it's necessary to saying some of that. They measure grade level competency. And if you look at the results, they'll tell you that, so in a way, the entire measurement is different. We measure the household, we measure all children. I think in a country where 50% of the kids are not going to government schools, and it is a law that you are responsible for all children, you come up with how you're going to get to the other children. So I think there's been a healthy friction between NCRT and us. And just the day before I came, there was a meeting in NCRT convened by the ministry, which we were all looking at the same place, saying, you must come up with something common. And we all said, yes. But I think that's more importantly, I think not just in India, but I think in large parts of the world where reading is an issue, you've got to recognize that and have some measurement in place for that, because otherwise you can't help the kids. Just by knowing that you got a score of 45 is not helpful. I need to know what to do to improve that. And I think secondly, we need to also get away from grade level and have a whole range of, and I think NCR is getting better in that sense. In the new education policy, there's all kinds of measurement which is being thought of. And I also think that we have to have in countries which are resource constrained, you have to have measurement that can lead to action quickly and measurement that everybody can understand. And you look at every measurement that happens, that kind of thing like it's fine to have one sophisticated measurement once a year, once every other year for everyone. But if you want to have some evidence connected to reality, it's important that the measurement be digestible by most people.
Thank you, Rukmini. We have a reception outside. I think you've heard her, and you can see why she's such an inspiring figure. She brings a very pragmatic optimism to what she does. And she reminds me that those who can do and those who can't teach. So some of us have to do that. About half a century ago, her father was here to do his PhD in English. I got the dissertation and I read it, and lo and behold, I could actually understand it, even though it was in the English department. There was no post-colonial thought. There was, yes, it was pre-colonial. It was a beautifully written, dissertation. So we have a copy of his dissertation for you. So please join us outside, and you can again talk to her there. Thank you all for being here.